Welcome everybody to the final day of the Hippodrome Silent Film Festival online edition, and sadly to our final live event, a live Q&A, and I hope you're all fresh from our presentation of the world premiere of a new restoration of Sparrows with music composed by the Graves brothers, presented in collaboration with the Mary Pickford Foundation. I'm just going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. We've got 45 minutes for this Q&A. Everybody here who's attending is muted, and I'm afraid I can't see your hands if you use that raise hand function, but we do have the Q&A box there at the bottom. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and I'll do my best to work my way through those as we go through our chat. You can see that we've got the wonderful Greg here, who's providing British Sign Language interpretation, and access for deaf and hard of hearing people is also helped because we've got live captioners who are providing the captions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a CC box, and you can click on that to choose either captions or a full transcript of what is being discussed. The other thing to say is that you won't be able to see the captions if you're watching this streaming live on Facebook via the hub. But now I'd like to invite our special guests to turn on their cameras, please. Wonderful, wonderful. We've got everyone. So we've got, I'd like to welcome Taylor Graves and Cameron Graves, our musicians, and Henry Stotsenberg and Elaina Friedrichsen from the Mary Pickford Foundation. So I should say the Graves brothers, as Cameron and Taylor, and Elaina Friedrichsen is Director of Archive and Legacy at the Mary Pickford Foundation and head of production at the Mary Pickford Company. And Henry Stotsenberg is the CEO and chairman of the Mary Pickford Foundation. And welcome to all of you. I'm so happy to have you here. And they're all of them coming to us from their homes in California, and it's not to be confused with the California in Falkirk. This is the glamorous California on the west coast of America. We're very excited. And the other little thing before we start the questions, I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish Taylor a very happy birthday. Happy birthday, Taylor. So glad you could be here as part of your special day.
Yay.
Right, so I'm going to dive in with the questions. Taylor and Cameron, to start with you, you've both made names for yourselves. You've got very successful careers in the music industry, working separately with really high profile A-listers, but you've now combined your talents to make this new musical ensemble, and quite recently, I think that's right. And I just wondered what had prompted you to join forces to work professionally with each other, and what's it like working with your brother?
You can go ahead, Cameron.
Well, you know, Taylor and I have always partnered in many projects since the beginning, since us starting in the music industry. You know, we were first signed to MCA when we were about 17, 18, under Randy Jackson, actually. Randy Jackson from American Idol.
Wow.
And that was kind of our first team up. In terms of, it was an R&B pop group signed, and that was kind of our first time kind of teaming up on a project. And then we just kept it rolling from there. We had a couple of different bands that we partnered up on, and we've always been into hip hop producing. And then I joined Wicked Wisdom like when I was about 22, 23. That was early 2000s. And from there, I met Jada Pinkett. And because of that introduction, that's when I kind of brought Taylor in terms of he, you know, to some of the rehearsals, some of the recordings, Taylor would be there. and he'd also, be, in conversations with Jada, and we'd all kind of be hanging out. And later on, when Wicked Wisdom kind of fizzled out, that's when Jada approached us because she saw that, we can do classical music and we can write jazz and we can write all these different styles. She approached us to do her movie, The Human Contract. And that's
2018 was that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was the first time me and Taylor linked up as the Graves brothers on a actual film. Was that time. Yeah.
And, but it's interesting. I mean, that world you describe and the sort of music you describe, and I think the R&B and pop and funk and electronic, and it all seems quite miles away from the world of silent film and film archives, and hanging out with Will Smith and Jada Smith. So how did you get involved with silent film specifically and this project?
Well, it really, we're classical musicians. We started basically playing classical music at the age of 4 and 5 as pianists. And so that is like the first musical style that we learned. So it's innately in us to create music with that, from that angle. And this was much further down the line, like a year and a half ago. I just was doing a session in a large studio that was beautiful. I was just working on an artist's song and applying that sort of style to what they wanted, and then that's when Henry came out and was like, hey man, I like your play style. Why don't you come check out what we got going on in the back room? And so I never imagined really in my whole life that I would really be doing any silent films, but I'm kind of like a history buff as a person anyways. So I was intrigued immediately when Henry showed me what exactly, they were producing and what was going on. And so that was like one of those, serendipitous moments that happened in a musician's life. It wasn't planned, it just happened. It was in the right place at the right time, I believe.
So Henry, what was it that was you? What was it that struck you then? What made you think, oh, this we've got to bring these guys in?
Well, yeah, he was in our facility. We have a studio in LA, recording studios, soundstage, and all that kind of stuff. And so Taylor was working in there. And I was asking Taylor afterwards, he was, when he was working on his music video, I was saying, I was asking him some questions about him, and he told me about this movie or short film he worked on that won the Academy Award. And I go, what? You're kidding me. And I said, so he was telling me more about it. I said, come here, let's talk. And so I took him in and showed him some short films that we did. We go through a whole process with our musicians, and we first put them on a short film and see how they do. It's kind of an audition piece, so it's 15 minutes, called The Biographs. And Taylor knocked it out of the park. So I said, okay, we're going to sign you up. We want to sign you up for a full-length feature. And
then hence Sparrows.
That was Sparrows. And actually, we were thinking about another one, but I said, no, I got a feeling about Sparrows. I said, let's send this to Taylor. I think, let's see what he says. And yeah, so.
And now this is I'm right, aren't I? This is the world's premiere of a new restoration with the new score. And I wondered, what does it feel like for you to have, I mean, presumably it wasn't the way you'd envisaged originally premiering your work, but how does it feel to know that you've just shared it with this big audience online?
Well, I think
Taylor?
What do you think, Henry?
I thought that was for Taylor.
Yeah, who is that for?
The Taylor and Cameron, tell me first how you felt as the musician sharing your music in your performance in this festival.
I'm honored. I'm honored, especially after a year of COVID and things not really going the way, I envisioned. I
Mm.
feel it's almost like a release. It's definitely, like I said, I'm just honored to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. And Cameron, I mean, the difference between for performing live and doing it in the digital world. How about you?
Well, I mean, it's something that comes naturally to both Taylor and I, because that we've done both forever. Obviously production and songwriting and composing, but then also live performance. But this is something. It's really exciting because, it's really hard to get into the music scoring world in the entertainment industry and in the music industry. Very, very hard. And so this was such a great opportunity that Elaina and Henry opened their doors to us in terms of, scoring these silent films. One, it actually allows us to practice our music scoring and really find our sound in that. But then also too, just to build a name for ourselves as the Graves brothers in the music scoring world with this particular type of film, because most films don't have an hour 40 minutes worth of music all the way through. And so when you do that, that's almost like showing your muscle right there in terms of a composer. So it's really, really good.
Music. And it really, I mean, it really is their treasured baby that they've given to you. I mean, Elaina and Henry, this is such a beautiful restoration, isn't? And I wonder if you could tell us a bit maybe about I mean, it's a big topic, of course, but the restoration, one thing that occurred to me was the titles, for example. My eye was drawn to them because they're so witty and funny, but how did you restore the titles, and what were the particular challenges of this film? What was the material you were starting with?
Well, we accessed the preservation elements from the Library of Congress. So we worked with them years ago, way back in like 2006, I believe. Sharing elements and going through all of the film elements, making sure that the best scenes were chosen. And so what they basically created, we took it from there, and we had the film scanned 4K digital. And then we went through the film within a digital budget then to see what we can clean up, what splices were still there. Often actual film masks imperfections. Whereas when something is scanned 4K digital, it's very apparent to the eye when you see that piece of tape or that smudge. And so we were able to, in the digital world, do as much cleanup as we can, matching the original tints and working with the original titles, which are quite clever, written by the author, Pickford, and working with Mary, of course, on the titles. But we mastered it as best we could so that it could be seen in its most beautiful light for an audience today, especially in a platform such as this one, and a digital platform where you can't always go to a theater, and therefore we would we want our films to be seen on television and Blu-ray and ways that people can access them easier. So we wanted to really focus heavily. We were lucky to be able to have such beautiful elements to work with from the get-go, and then to take it in the digital world where we could clean it up as best we could and take it from there. And then, of course, sync up the score. And we worked first on the digital restoration, and then we were able to provide a proxy to Taylor and Cameron so that they could work with us closely on the score, and we could make sure it all came together as one final work of art.
Oh, it's such a beautiful result. And I think maybe it's a good time to talk about Mary. The foundation exists presumably to celebrate and protect and preserve and make available her work. But I think it really bears saying that Mary Pickford is a was an inspirational figure in the film industry, and very topical at the moment when in the recent Academy Award shortlist that reminds us that over that 93 years of the Academy Award, there's only been 7 women nominated for the best director category. And I know this isn't about her as a director, but she was somebody, wasn't she, that was so instrumental in all elements of film production. But maybe you could tell us a little bit, Henry and Elaina, about Mary Pickford and her status in Hollywood at the time that this film was made, and her significance.
Elaina?
Well, do you want me to start, Henry? Or?
Yes, yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Oh, I mean, it's very important that people start to recognize Mary Pickford for the power that she was, for the foresight that she had. I mean, from very, very early on. This is a girl who was on stage at 5, and who, from 1909 to 1919, she became the most powerful woman in the world, really. And went from taking any role in the short films, the American biographs, and the independent motion picture films and majestic films. She went from playing any role, writing a lot of her own scenarios, to ending up optioning her own book stories so that she would produce, and she hired cast, hired crew, was completely hands-on with everything that she did. And also one of the founding members, of course, of United Artists Studios and Production Company, the Motion Picture Television Fund, as we know it today, the home, was a dream of hers, and of course the Academy. So by the time Mary got to the mid-20s, she actually ghost wrote one of her films, Little Annie Rooney, the film right before Sparrows, and used her maternal grandmother's name, Catherine Hennessy, because she felt she had too many credits. So with the production company, she was the producer, she was the star, she was overseeing every minute of every bit of the production. And then when she got toward making Sparrows, it was another not child role, but adolescent role, and her last. And in an adjoining set, of course, her husband, Douglas Fairbanks, was making The Black Pirate, and they worked together, they showed up on the set together, they had lunch together, and they left together. But they had a huge studio, the Pickford Fairbanks studio in West Hollywood, and 3 acres of land on this studio was completely transformed to create the swamp that is seen in Sparrows. So yeah, Mary's always been a powerhouse, and we hope a lot of the work we're doing today, forming partnerships with archives to restore her films, to digitally master them so they can be seen on all platforms, and working with very talented composers to create beautiful scores. All of this for the main purpose of the new audiences discovering Mary, audiences already love her, having more films to appreciate, and really, you know, planting her name right up there where it should be.
Absolutely.
That's one of the most powerful women ever in the film industry.
Oh, absolutely. And Henry, I just wanted to say you have a family connection that goes back a while with Mary Pickford. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you tell us how what that link is?
Well, you know, from the beginning, my uncle was her trusted financial advisor for many years, right up to her death. And he advised Mary to form this foundation. And she was kind of confused about what she wanted to do. Catholic Church wanted her money. Christian Science Church wanted her money. And so he says, listen, form a foundation, put your estate in there, and it'll last 1,000 years. So that's what he did. And I stepped in his shoes several years ago. Back in 1997, it's more than several.
Yeah.
And I love her character in this film. There's lots of really distinct characters across the film, though. Obviously, she shines. But I wanted to ask Taylor and Cameron about your approach in terms of themes around the characters, and maybe you could talk to the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Who would like to go first? Taylor.
I'll go first. You know, it's funny because Elaina really helped shape the score as well in this for the Sparrows with her suggestions and guidance. And And so what we were talking about from the very start was how Mary's character was very hopeful, you know, and it was almost like the children's only hope in this godforsaken swamp, you know, and so we wanted to kind of create, you know, whenever she was consoling the kids, or anytime she was around the kids, we wanted to create that happy space, that hopeful space, that positive, you know, that positive vibe. So I feel like she was the necessary contrast from, you know, the Mr. Grimes theme, which I basically pulled from all my childhood scary movies. You know, you really got to pull from things that you've seen, you know. And so I pulled from some of my childhood scary films, and you know, I felt like less was more when it came to Mr. Grimes. And so some little, you know, tinkly bell sound that almost brings the hairs up on the back of your neck was what was necessary to contrast that scary thing with, you know, her hopeful, positive, loving theme. And so I think the play of those two, you know, characters and their themes, their respective themes, is what creates, you know, the flow in Sparrows. And also the you know, kind of like we create, you know, multiple different themes from one theme, you know, within a movie, right? And so with her positive theme, we were able to spin off with multiple different themes for almost different kids within each scene, or, you know, and also when she's like fighting Mr. Grimes off, you almost hear, you know, both of their themes, but it's just clashing, you know, and I really like that a lot, you know. So that was my you know, approach, and Cameron's as well.
Cameron, did you have anything to add to that you wanted to say?
I mean, that's exactly it. Try to find the contrast, you know. And you try to play around with the different themes as they go along, so it's not monotonous, and it moves with the film, you know. You always want to move with the film.
I'm interested that you said about the different children as well, having and it's an opportunity to draw in the audience, because the straight away the box was pinging with questions about the children, and they're just really genuinely engaging, because sometimes child performances can be a bit cloying, but so I'm going to just take the first question. It's, hello, amazing movie. Was this film the start of stopping baby farms, and did children really die on them? And I think you meant there's a reference to the baby farms in the restoration titles at the beginning, but could somebody, Taylor, you're nodding, tell us, what do you know about this?
Well, you know, that would actually be a question for Elaina. That's a historical question. But yes, the kids, they all have their different personalities. My favorite was Sputters. But let me pass the baton to Elaina to answer that.
Well, Winifred Dunn pulled stories from the news, and it was a very difficult time for overcrowded orphanages, babies just being left anywhere on doorsteps. And there was a horrible practice back then in certain areas of the country where, they called them baby farms. And so Mary thought this was horrifying. And just as she played an orphan in many of her films, she felt that this is something socially people need to be aware of. I don't know the specifics of the statistics, but I do know that people were shocked. And one of the reasons they were shocked is Mary said, you know, maybe we made this film too good. It was too eerie. It was too scary, and it was too close to home, because it's something that is actually a problem in this country at the time. So she wanted to create an atmosphere on the set where the kids really felt at home there, even though it was such a horrible place. So she paid all the child actors weeks before production started. And she allowed, because they had to be barefoot basically until the very last scene, they were able to come on a full-time salary and just run around on this set, this crazy swamp, where they planted 600 trees and created swamp atmosphere and quicksand, so that these kids could to really thrive. And she got very close to these children. She loved them. Little Mary Grace White, I believe, the little girl, the little baby that she falls in love with, she tried to adopt this child.
Oh, I wondered if that is that true. I wondered if it was a media story.
Oh no, she wanted to adopt the child, and they stayed in touch through the 1970s. They had correspondence, and Mary always signed their letters Mama Molly.
Oh.
So she was very close to this role. She was very close to all of her roles, but they all had a purpose for her. And yes, there was a big purpose behind this film, in a substance, to make people aware of this as an issue and a problem at times. But photographically, is she had 3 different directors of photography working on this film, so that the imagery could be as on par with the German expressionist silent cinema, the absolutely stunning sets and beautiful, realistic photography. And again, because it didn't do so well in the box office at the time, Mary felt that it was because perhaps they portrayed it too well, and it was too close to home and a little too frightening.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to draw, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to draw out another question that's here in the chat from Mike Machon at the Library of Congress, actually, talking about he says, Cameron and Taylor, because this is a question for you, Sparrows is a very melodramatic film with intense emotions. Were there parts of it that were harder to score than others?
Yes, and no, because like I said, we had careful and complete guidance from Elaina historically about it. And so I would say, it was some of the sad moments, like Sputters being sold and leaving the farm. I feel like, I had to tap into my emotional center for me to create the music in that. And so in that way, yes, it was challenging, because you have to really get into the emotional situation. And so sometimes when you do that, you can become overwhelmed. You got to take a step back, and then come back to it. But I will say that, it flowed so easily for us to create the music for this movie, that it wasn't hard and more of in a technical aspect at all. It was definitely a challenge, though, to tap into those emotions. And then once tapped in, sometimes it was heavy.
I mean, you mentioned about the sad moments, but the scene that genuinely had me, in bits, when the baby dies, yeah. And I love the way you handled that sequence. And it's very, like you say, it's little. You take it right down, and you've just got the harp, I think, that reminds you of the harp at the beginning with when they're flying the kite. I really enjoyed what you did with that. It was devastating, that bit, but also along that theme of the emotions of the film, it struck when you're watching, the tension's unbearable. The escape from the swamp goes on for so long, and then the escape in the boat. So how do you keep up that tension across such an extended? You can't sort of pitch it here right away, can you?
Yeah, definitely want to start low and then go high, especially with those scenes that basically it basically is a very long escape scene, and so it felt like adding the solo cellist in there really brought out like a characteristic in the chase scene that brings it to life, in my opinion. Artyom, that was our cellist soloist in that, and he really just brought out that tension, and I felt like, with the big drums hitting, and when you have like the timpani going and all that, it really just kind of culminates to when they get rescued, and the release, so with music, that's pretty much what is really important is the buildup and the release. I don't know, maybe Cameron has something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, pretty much when you watch a film, it's like every single scene brings its own musical imagery to it, you know, and it touches it, you know, for Taylor and I, like it touches you know, memories of musics that we heard in films or in cartoons that we love. And so, you know, we kind of reach for those musical memories and kind of bring them out. You know, I mean, the funny thing is, you know, this film was it was a suspense type of film, you know, kind of darker, suspenseful. So it's funny with those kinds of films, you know, you have a wider spectrum of music that can work as opposed to, you know, romantic comedies type of films, you know what I mean? And so because of that, you can experiment with different sounds, you can experiment with different harmonies, melodies, different instrumentation combinations, and certain things like that. So you know, yeah, that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what I did. Definitely trying to create tension and release all the time in this film, because that's basically what this film was about. You know, you have the tension with Mr. Grimes, and then you have the release when it seems as though the children are safe with Mary, you know, so.
And it's fascinating to hear when Elaina was describing the some of the on-scene, behind the scenes, what was the scenario when the film was being made. And I read that, is it that some quite far-fetched accounts of how things were happening on the set at the time? I don't know, Henry or Elaina, if you know, is it true that there were real alligators? I find that hard to believe, but I gather Mary said there were.
Well, alligators. Okay, we've we commissioned Carrie Beecham to research, who's a part of the foundation, member of the foundation, to research the alligator story. And she's uncovered some interesting stuff.
So first, could you explain what the alligator story is to the audience, and then? Yeah.
Well, the problem is, as you crawl across the limb, of course, there's alligators in the swamp that if they fall off the limb, they're going to be eaten by an alligator. So you know, I was curious about this and how that worked really, and because in those days you didn't have those rules in place, you know, to protect people or whatever. And so we found out that there's first of all, there was a time when there was a mattress under the limb as they crawl across. There's another time when the alligators were fake, you know, opening their jaws. And I understand that the real alligators, I think they had their mouths wired shut or something.
Oh,
I'm not sure. But yeah, so when they shot it with those three different kinds of combinations of things.
so maybe no cruelty to children, but cruelty to alligators, maybe.
Well, apparently, according to Hal Moore, it was a split screen. I mean, he insists that they cranked the camera and they matched the shots in continuity, and they put in the alligator shots afterwards, although Doug and Marion were telling a different story, that it was very frightening. I'm sure it was both. I'm sure there was situations where there were alligators and they had pulleys on their mouths, which is a great story. But there was also split screen in order to be able to have the kids crawl across and not have something horrible happen. So I tend to believe Hal Moore's take on it, that they did carefully watch the continuity with the camera and that they did rewind and place the alligators accordingly, according to how the children went across. It was very difficult film to shoot. And this is just one of many problems that they ran into.
Because this relates perhaps to a question. I mean, despite that, it does look as though the children have a real relationship with Mary Pickford on the screen, and really look like they draw wonderful performances from them. And this question is two parts really. Did any of them write accounts of the experience, but also did any of them stay in show business? So what happened to those?
I don't know that much about the kids, except the few that she got close to. They all mentioned things like the fact that they got paid in advance. They were allowed to run around the set. William Bodine did an excellent job directing so many children at once, as he had done on Little Annie Rooney. Each kid was allowed to have their own personality, their own relationship with Mary. She did get close to the kids on the set and mothered them behind the scenes in so many ways, and made sure that they were happy, they were comfortable. Their parents were always there. They were allowed to, run about as children do. And so when the scary moments came on, I think it made it easier for them to get through that. They did have trust in Mary, and I believe they had a lot of trust in the director, because he did an excellent job in treating the kids not just as a mob of kids, but as each individual child, to care about them and how they survive this. I love the scene toward the end when they're rescued, and she says to the police officer, "They're all mine."
It's lovely. It really balances that the melodrama and the tension with the moments of comedy and lightness. And it was surprising to me what a comedic actress she was. I mean, I haven't seen so much of her work, but she was so, when she's pretending to swat the fly, for example. Yeah,
Mary loved do it. And from the beginning, from 1909, you see so many very natural and delightful comedic performances by her. I think that she always had a lot of fun when the cameras were rolling, and it shows. But again, it's a beautiful film visually, and a very serious tale that they took on. So it was risky at the time to take on a story like this, especially when it was so close to home, because this was a problem in this country at the time.
Yeah. And this is another question about the music that I had. Just right at the end, there's it's interesting how different musicians across the festival have a different approach. And there's a shot of sheet music, I think, and it's "Shall We Gather at the River," that they're clearly making a bit of a, I don't know, why did you decide not to play "Shall We Gather at the River"? And what was your, Cameron and Taylor, what was your thinking there?
Well,
I think Taylor did it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got a different tune in America.
Yeah.
Well, Henry and I work very closely together, overseeing all the scores at all the passes. And Henry sees the big picture a lot. He actually said the entire swamp scene should be seen as a separate film on itself musically, because it's such a long scene. And he was very much adamant that the spiritual essence of the scene where Jesus comes to take the baby to heaven is given that subtlety and the power when it needs it. So where I'll look more at line by line, Henry sees more of the big picture look. And we decided that a spiritual theme should come out at the end, instead of hearing an actual, be so blatant as this is what you're seeing, this is what you're hearing. We felt it would take away from their music, basically. And we also felt this is a spiritual moment. So let's get back to that theme. Let's go back to that. Every time we felt a spiritual uplifting moment, these guys went to that cue. So first they did do that church song, and we rejected that. We just said, we want your music, basically. And we want this spirituality throughout, and not such a direct reference to what you're seeing in that sense.
I think it was
like a film. We always like a score to not overwhelm the film, but to uplift it and to respect the artist in that sense.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Cameron and Taylor, to that? I think it's a really interesting choice, and giving the Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I really liked Elaina and Henry's suggestion. I really appreciated that, because I felt like the song, it was actually a hymn, you know, and it's in a major key if you actually check out how the song goes. And for the moment in which like our music was definitely in a different key, and it would have just kind of, you know, disrupted the flow that we had. And so when, you know, Elaina, you know, instructed that we do our music, that I actually thought that was a great idea, you know. And you know, I was trying to respect the film, but then Elaina was like, let's do this, and I'm like, yes, let's do this.
It was fun working with these guys. They're so talented. And I just have to say, you know, when we first offered Taylor the Mountaineer's Honor, which is an American biograph film that we have on our YouTube page, our channel, it just blew us away immediately, what the talent and the orchestration and the way that the music was played, it was just so gorgeous. So we immediately wanted to sign these guys up for a feature, and they are now at work on another film score.
Yes, that's exciting. Do you want to announce? I don't know, is this public knowledge? Is this a new announcement?
No, yes, this would be the first time we're announcing that the Graves brothers will be scoring My Best Girl, the restored version of My Best Girl.
Yay.
I love that film. I'm so looking forward to that. Maybe, I mean, we're really near. Oh, there's another question in the box. Congratulations on a wonderful restoration, and to the Graves brothers for a fantastic score. Oh, any further plans to score silent films? I certainly hope so. So that question just been answered. That's wonderful. Maybe we could just finish by a quick question about what happened to Mary Pickford's career after the transition to sound. If you could tell us as a rounding up.
Well, I think this was at a time in her life, I mean, I would say from like 1914 up until probably 1927, she was top box office, absolutely, you know, in control of her career. I think a lot of people were thrown for a loop when sound came in. She even said sound should have been first and then silent films, so that maybe we could have appreciated the silent films more. They'd have more longevity. You know, it was daunting, but she took it on. You know, her and Douglas took on Taming of the Shrew in its talkie version. She did get the first Academy Award for a talkie and Coquette. And then, of course, went on to make, you know, quite a few very popular sound films, Kiki, and of course, her last film, Secrets, was just beautiful. I just think at that point, personally, there was a lot going on in Mary's life with her divorce to Douglas. Her mother passed away, her brother passed away. I think there was a time when actresses, once they hit 35, they're considered to be too old to take on certain roles, even if you're producing your own films. So I think it was just time, she just felt it was time to retire. And honestly, what I always found interesting in her last film, Secrets, the most powerful scene in the film is silent. And we have a clip of it on our website, but she's holding a baby that is dying, and there's shooting going on all around her in the Wild West, and she holds a mirror to the baby to see if it's breathing, and it's not. And then she rocks this baby to sleep, and it's so moving and so beautiful, and no words spoken. And that would be her last film in 1933. I think Mary was more comfortable with silent film because, well, it was her medium, and you know, she played a huge part in creating how the film industry was going to work in silent cinema. So, but then she became a producer, of course. So.
Well, thank you so much for that, and I think that's just one little tidbit that makes. It's going to make people want to go to the Mary Pickford Foundation website to learn, where you can learn more about her and all the things she achieved, and see more about the work that you are doing, Henry and Elaina and the team there, and keep an eye out for restorations and more work that's coming up. We do have to wrap up, but there's a few things that I want to say at the end as well. Cameron Graves, Cameron's got an album out last month, just a few weeks ago now, and it's called 7, and it was released on the February the 19th, And so if anybody's been tickled or you know, wants to really enjoyed the music and you want to get more of Cameron's music, that's a brand new album out there. But both of the brothers have got back catalogues that you can explore. And as you know now, the next thing they're scoring is My Best Girl. We're very excited about that. But this is our final night, and I do hope that the audience can join us over at the Facebook hub, the virtual hub of HippFest online. And Taylor and Cameron have very kindly agreed to hop over there and hang out there for chat. And if you've got any more questions, then we've run out of time, or would like to tell them more about your response to the score, please join us there. And just to remind you, the Saturday and Sunday films are still available for you to stream. You could persuade your friends to buy a pass if they haven't already, and then they can also enjoy Sparrows. We really hope this is the end. Yeah, well, we really hope you, it just occurred to me, this is the very end. But we hope you've enjoyed HippFest and that we can all be together in real life next year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
For having us.